So we'll do now some practical exercise, and we call it the data curation checklist. So this is so let's assume you have already your data, you want to submit it to PANGAEA, but beforehand we encourage you to use, for example, the data curation checklist, and then we can you can check your data for some common mistakes which you might have overlooked, and which then makes life easier for everybody after submission. So this is, I'm going to present an Python Jupyter Notebook, but you can also do it in R. So Dana was so nice to translate everything in R. If you want to do it in R, click this link. We are now doing it in Python, but everything is in the Git repository hub. So, or GitHub repository. So if you click on that link, you get directly directed to the data curation checklist. So there's more in our community workshop material repository, and we will be in the Python section, but as I said, you will find more also if you look for R coding, then just go here. I will present it, or we will do it live in a so-called Google Colab session. You can follow it by clicking on this link. I hope somebody shared the link in the chat so that you can follow. If you're not a friend of Google, then you can simply download everything from here and do it at home on your own computer. So let's click on it and see what happens. There we go. Okay, so this part is the Python code in the form of a Jupyter Notebook. There is the content list to the left side, so I will go through it bit by bit, but in case you are bored or you want to check something afterwards, you can just click somewhere and you jump there immediately inside the script. So that's kind of handy. In case you want, in these cells, there's then the code. For example, before we do anything, we need to import libraries and packages. And in order to run this code, you simply click here on this play button. And then it's running. The first one will take a bit longer because you're actually installing some packages which are not, which are not very common. But after a couple of seconds, everything is ready to go. So usually it's done after 20 seconds, and then we can start. So done. So everything was successfully installed and all libraries are loaded. Yesterday, we already had a look at some test data sets with some random numbers, and we deliberately added some mistakes for you to find, and we will basically do that again. So first, we are creating some fake data, and these are the mistakes. These are very common from that's what our experience as data curator tells us, which are very common. And so the first part is just a function to create test fake data. And you actually create the fake data and you store it in a so-called data frame by applying this function here. So let's have a look what it looks like. So data frame is where the data is stored in. And if you put in the command head or tail, you will see the first 5 rows or the last 5 rows. So you get a good overview. Here we go. So in our test data case or test file, we can see that there is date time and it's separated. Then we have a comment row which doesn't belong there. By some accident, there the comma separator is usually a dot, or the decimal separator is usually a dot, but for this number, it's a comma. Latitude, longitude are in the wrong format and stuffed in one column. And there is a completely empty row. And if we focus on the last 5 rows, then we can see that there's another row which doesn't belong there. So we need to get rid of it and clean up the rest. And I'm going to show you how you can do it. One other thing I'd like to point out before we go in. So here you have the content list and you get it via this little icon, but there's also another icon like a directory. And there there's already sample data created by Google, but we have just created the test data set. And during running this script, we will create more data sets, and you can actually get them and download them by finding them here and clicking on the 3 buttons, and then you can see the download button. So in case you need it afterwards. So let's start. We have our data creation checklist, and we need to remember the data structure PANGAEA would like to have means one cell means one entry, one variable or parameter per column, so nothing stuffed together, and each row is one single observation. There's one single header row, and we do not want a mix of numerical values and strings, so text. So first, check the data structure, and we're going to have a look at the first 2 rows again. What was it like? And or here's an alternative way to do it. So you can look at the first and the last rows put together, and then we want to remove rows that are not part of the observation. So we want to remove the comment row, and we want the row with the statistics. So this thing here, our table is called a data frame, and now we are choosing the parts of the data frame. So the first part here is telling us which rows we want, and the last part is telling us which columns we want. And we want to get rid of the first one, which has the index 0. So we want only from starting index 1 till the very end. So we tell it, give me everything from index 1 to, and if there's nothing, it means everything, and all columns, because there's just a colon. And then let's do it and check again. And now the first row with index 0 is gone. So now we want to also get rid of the last row, and we do it the same way. So here we indicate which rows we want, and we want everything but the very last one, and we want all the rows. And so we choose what we want, and then we can see the last one has vanished. So we are interested in data types. Are the data types as expected? So as mentioned before, we want, if you have numbers, then these should be defined as numbers. And of course, if you have text, then of course they remain text. But we do not want formulas. For example, if you're submitting an Excel sheet, then please export your Excel results without the formulas. And if you have missing values, for example, we created here a couple of number of missing values. Here, these are the ones that were recognized by the software, so NaNs. But then there are additional missing values, for example, negative and these many 9s, or there is the n/a. So we put those here deliberately. The software cannot recognize these, so it's very important that missing values are recognized in order not to accidentally put wrong values into PANGAEA, which are recognized as values and not as missing numbers. And So what PANGAEA would like to have is empty cells. I'm aware that not every software can deal with it. So for example, if you're working with MATLAB, then this is not happening without destroying your matrix structure. So therefore, if you cannot replace your missing values with empty cells, then make sure it's one missing value type only. And then when you submit your data, please write a little comment and say, my data contain missing value, and they are, for example, NINs or N/A, but make sure it's only one type so the data curator can deal with it. So let's check the data types by the command is the info, and then we can have a look. Here we go. So you get a number of all the columns that are there, and you get an information of whether the cells or whether the values are filled. So for each of these columns, they're completely filled with values, but they're all of the data type object, which means it's a mix of numerical values and string. So that's not what we want, and this is not good, so we are going to tidy this up. The only thing where we can see this is numerical numbers is the column that's called empty because it's completely, yeah, it is completely empty, so there is nothing in there. So what was it looking like again? At first we want to remove all columns that contain nothing. So there's a little function that's called drop NAs, and it's making or it's checking complete columns, and if they're really completely empty, then they are dropped, so they are removed. So let's see. So the last row has vanished. There is no empty row any longer. If you have more than one type of missing values, then please make sure that they're that they are consistent. So only one is acceptable. And if you are working with something like Python, you can replace it with empty cells. If you're so therefore, this is the way how to do it by replacing whatever random missing value you have with an empty cell. So we know that because we added there that by mistake there is a that we have a wrong separator in there. So first we check where it is. So we know it's somewhere in the latitude column. So let's have a look at the unique values of the latitude column. And this one is actually unique because it has a comma instead of a dot. And what you can also see is that there are the single quotation marks around the numbers, which is telling you that the software thinks this is text instead of numerical values, and it cannot recognize the numerical values because of this comma. So therefore, there's a little function that is telling or that is replacing commas with dots, and we are applying this function to the column of latitude. And if we check again what's inside there now, then you can see the comma has been gone, but there's still the single quotation mark. So the software still thinks this is a column full of text instead of numerical values. Therefore, the next step would be whenever you have numerical values, they should be recognized as numerical values, and therefore we're going to convert them. So there's also a function that's working on it, and we are applying it on the latitude column. And afterwards, if we check again, then you can see this is really actual numbers. And the single quotations are gone. So that's quite handy. If you can apply this this function to one individual column, but you can also apply it to a lot of columns at the same time. So from column 6 to the rest of the columns, we are applying everything, or we're converting everything to numerical values. And that also works. And if we check the data type afterwards, then you can see you have numerical values for latitude, longitude, water depth, and water temperature. The rest is still a mix of text and numerics. So one reason why you might not be able to convert to numerical values is if you have trailing or leading white spaces in it, or if your text is truly text, then also these white spaces can cause quite of chaos. If you, for example, want to filter something. So therefore, it's always good to remove them. So let's check what columns do we have. So this is another way of showing us what are the column names. And now we are searching for leading and trailing white spaces and everything that has a D-type object. So in all of these, so we select only those of the types object, and in there, everything that has a trailing or leading white space, this one is getting stripped off. So that's why it's called strip of a string. There's an optional way of doing it by using the replace command with regular expressions. So now we got rid of that, so that's always nice. Let's have a look at what our data looks like right now, and we still see that we have some problems here, or that we have, for example, we have latitude and longitude stuffed in one column, and the date and time is separated in two columns, and it's not in the ISO format as PANGAEA would like it. And the ISO format looks, for example, like this, with date and capital T for time, and then the time in UTC. So it's always important that you provide us with times in UTC. If you need additional local time, then make an extra column in local time. So if we check our date time, or if we check the format again, then we can see the date and the time is not recognized at date times. So, but we can actually convert it so it's called to date time. And we are creating a new column where we combine them and we convert them at the same time. So the Jupyter Notebook and the Pandas library is actually a really nice, powerful tool, which does it very easily for you. So here's your original date and time format, and now you have this date time in one column. And if you check again, what's the date, what is the type, then you can see the new column is actually a date time. So the software has recognized that this is actually date time format, and because of that, you can easily change the format in, for example, the ISO format. So here is it with a capital T. Since you do no longer need the individual date and time columns, you can quickly remove them with the dropping command. Now it's gone. So we are looking at now or PANGAEA is very strict, or would like to have everything in the latitude, longitude degrees first in a specific projection, so that south and west are negative numbers, and we want decimal degree and not this one with the little circles and the quotation marks. So first, we need to make sure that we separate latitude and longitude. So we can split it. And in this case, it's the semicolon that is actually separating them. So we can split everything that's in front of the semicolon to a new column that's called lat, and everything that's behind it, we put it in a new column that's called long. And voila, it's as easy as that. Now we can remove this one. We no longer need it. And what we also want is that we would like to have now decimal degrees. And there's a little function that does it really quickly for you so that you get it in the correct format with 6 decimals maximum at the end. So this is the actual function. And here you apply this function to the column lat and long. And here you go. This is what PANGAEA is happy with these type of numbers. So what's usually also is quite common is that there are typos. I mean, everybody makes mistakes by typing, so that's rather common. So first, there is, or we are looking at typos also, but first we want to make sure that we're having in our column here, we have lots of abbreviations. So which are actually the abbreviations? So in the complete table, we have these are all the different abbreviations in there. So we put them in a little list called abbreviated, and then we having another list we created, which means spelled out, because only you know what this means. Nobody else is aware of what this might mean. And therefore, please spell out abbreviations. Otherwise, the curator will ask you to do it anyways, so you can do it beforehand. And then you'd just like to replace them. So in the column threatened status, you are replacing the abbreviated with the spelled out lists. And then this is something that other people can understand too. So we have one column with species, and especially when you have Latin names, it's really easy to put typos in. So so first we are looking at the individual species names. So just for us, we are having a look at so that we are dropping the duplicates, and then we are saving the individual species in a little file called species text. And it should appear here any second. Here we go. So, and at the first glance, this looks quite nice. We have 3 different species names. I don't see a typo, but let's check it. And if it's, so there are different web pages, for example, the worms web page. So you can look for taxon matches, or you can match the taxonomy. So for that, you need to download your little text file. And then you can go to worms. Yes, we want to go there. And then you can upload your little the little file that you just downloaded. So let's upload the species text. Sometimes the row delimiter is, or they're suggesting something which is not working out. So if you click on next, and you can see everything is next to each other, then this hasn't worked out. So then you can go back and choose a different one. In our case, it's just the line feed, and we have a column name in there. So let's look again. I've forgotten which file we have. Don't believe it. Come on. So do everything at once. So we collect species. We then say it's just line feed. and we have a header, and then we click next. And there it is. So these are the species names. Then we can click on matching. And now this web page Worms is actually checking whether our species names are correct, and it's not recognizing this one. So for me as a non-biologist, I still don't see where the error is, but this the taxon list is telling me, oh, this is not what we asked for Dolphinus, but it's Delphinus. So if we click on it, then we see exactly how it's done. So let's go back to our data curation list. And we know now that the Dolphinus is wrong and we want to replace it with Delphinus, and we're using the string replace function. And with one line, it's done. And then if you check afterwards, everything is fine again. So if you look at our data frame or at our data file, it's not yet completely looking nice. So because, well, we have it here somewhere. Because the header is not as PANGAEA would like it to have, and also some of the parameters. So Dana and others explained to you several times that especially the parameter names need to be harmonized in order for PANGAEA to recognize everything and to make your data fair. And these are actually not the header or the parameter names that can be immediately recognized. So therefore, you can do that beforehand, before you submit it. For example, you can look at similar data sets published and search for it in PANGAEA and have a look at it. Or you can look at what our parameter names are. We have a complete list that you can download. And you do it either by clicking on the help pages here in the wiki and go to parameters and download it, or if you're using a script like that, you just download it. And then it also appears here. So we open it and we quickly check how many parameters are in there. So it's more than 200,000 individual parameter names in there. So let's have a quick overview what's in there. So they can be quite complex, and as you can see, the list is really long. So are you going to look at it one by one? Of course not. You are using a function for that. And for example, you are asking, so you have a parameter that's called latitude. So let's have a look in the parameter table, what is there that contains latitude, and then you can see, so there are quite different types of latitudes, and this is the actual one from the geocode. If you have latitude, or sometimes if you have a spelling mistake, then you're not immediately find it what you're looking for, then you can look at close matches. And then it's also telling you which parameters exist which are similar. So maybe the latitude is in there too. So for example, it's telling you latitude 2 could be an option. So it's your job, please, to provide us with proper parameter names. Sometimes we do get abbreviations and then we need to ask, and then it's just taking lots of times, which you can, basically you can choose a shortcut and have a look at it beforehand. And then you can replace it. If you are working with something like Jupyter, then replace it really easily. So this is what we have currently. So these are the column names that are currently there. We looked them all up, and these are the actual harmonized names of the parameters, but you can also see that there was water depth in centimeters before. PANGAEA would like to have the water depth in meters. So therefore, we not only just rename it, but we also need to rescale it afterwards. And you just replace the column names. You can rename here, then I can show you, or the script, when you do it at home with your own time, you can look at how conversions are done, how to add things, for example, events, and then how to save your data in a way that it is tab separated, UDF-8 encoded. And so this is something that PANGAEA is recognizing. And if you submit something like this, you're saving everybody a lot of time with questions of what your actual data is about. So that was the thing about the data curation checklist. And if we go back to our community workshop slides, then there's just one more slide to go. And this is our take-home messages. So some of them you should recognize and remind already. Everything we are talking about is, or we're working on it, that everything is described in something that's called the author's guides. We are working on it very hard and they are coming soon. If you submit your data, please make it early on and no later than submitting your manuscript, because it simply takes time, because there's lots of going back and forth with your data curator and lots of work that is done by hand. Always cite your data and make sure that if your data has a DOI in PANGAEA, that you include it in the reference list of your paper. And if you want to submit, have a look at the templates, read the wiki. And if you still don't find what you're looking for, if you have still open questions, don't hesitate to